a very fun presentation today. First, real quick introduction. So this is a collaboration between CLF hubs, Los Angeles and Seattle, a West Coast collab here. And we have three very special guests today sharing a presentation that originally I saw at Greenbelt, or I missed. And so I had so much FOMO that I had to invite Kjell, Eden, and Pauline to share again with the CLF hub here. So it's around the topic of circular economy, so CLF is around embodied carbon. That's the topic. And I think there's been a really interesting kind of exciting momentum around circular economy and really using less new materials, keeping materials in the cycle for longer. And now excited to hand it over to our stellar group. Just a couple quick introductions. So Kjell Anderson, he's at Element Architects. I think the only person I know who's made an embodied carbon interactive game. Huge expert in this topic, authoring now the Path to Zero Carbon as part of adapting an online series from Element. Eden Brukman, also a wonderful star in the industry. I first became familiar for work when she was up in San Francisco, worked a lot. I'll share a link to the Building Reuse Innovation Center document that she helped co-author. But now we're very lucky to have her in San Diego, working for the county, having an amazing team down here. And Pauline, who also has a tremendous background in sustainability, over 35 years at WRNS Studios now. And the three of them will be sharing their experience on the Yellow Brick Road, which I also love the name, being from Kansas, and share firsthand experience about circular economy in action. So further ado, I'll give the floor to y'all.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And just appreciation for this opportunity to do an encore and the maybe slightly updated presentation from Greenbuild. Just happy that you all could be here today. And as Luke mentioned, we recognize that this journey is like the Yellow Brick Road, where there's a lot of pratfalls, but also a lot of beauty along the way. So we'll just go ahead and jump on in. As Luke mentioned, these are the three of us you'll be hearing from today. So as far as what is the circular economy, put some thoughts in the chat about what you think. What you think it might be. All good. A little sneak preview of some keywords there. What are words you think of when you think of the circular economy?
I can't see
There
them.
we go.
What
We've
are you
got
seeing?
reuse, we've got repurpose and salvage, extending usable life of materials, a reuse ecosystem. Absolutely. Keeping it out of the landfill. Yes, please. Save and repurpose. Eliminate the concept of waste. Everything is a resource. Design for disassembly. Healthy materials, regenerative, economic value. These are all true. This is Ellen MacArthur Foundation's definition. And some of the words that you're using are also showing up here, right? Where materials never become waste. Nature is regenerated. Where materials are kept in circulation. And today we're going to focus on that reuse, refurbishment, and remanufacturing, recognizing that there's also downcycling that can keep items in use. Cycling and composting being two different examples, and maintenance and skills and craftsmanship also come into play. Recognizing that we have global challenges, we have biodiversity loss, we think of waste as a noun instead of a verb, and that we are dealing with air quality issues, water contamination, issues with our soils not being able to optimize nutrients. And all of this can be improved as we think about circular opportunities that also decouple economic activity from the consumption of resources. So another fun, hopefully, activity is we realize that this is a journey. We're all in it together, and people are in different aspects of it. So I'm curious what persona defines your relationship with the circular economy. Are you one of the munchkins that you just want to get your projects done on time and under budget, and you can get on with life, and circular economy is just one more thing I have to deal with? Let's just put that aside. Let's keep our eye on the prize. Or are you more like the lion, the bashful lion who, I'd like to get started with reusing elements and dematerializing, but I'm nervous about the hurdles ahead, and I'm worried it will detract from project quality. Then there's the scarecrow. I feel like I don't know enough about how to apply circular principles to design projects, but I care about budgets and sustainability, so I want to do anything. Like if you only had a brain, right? And then there's the Tin Man who knows all the technical elements of sustainable, and he understands what needs to be done, but he thinks clients or other project partners simply don't care enough. He doesn't have that heart. And Dorothy, ever the optimist. I absolutely want us to transition to the circular economy. So I'll do whatever it takes to get us there. And of course, the all-knowing Glinda, she's been doing this for a while. She's got ideas. She knows she can share, she can mentor and help people understand what works and what doesn't. So think about where you fit along there. You can feel free to put it in the chat, give us an understanding of where we are on the spectrum between cynic and expert. It's something for us to definitely recognize that everyone is on a different part of this path, and these are the people we work with, right, to get things done. So I'm going to share a little bit about our work at the County of San Diego right now. And I think it's really important to think about context and how context matters. Of course, starting with why. And for some folks, people come to this for climate reasons and thinking about the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions and how to reduce our embodied carbon. Others think about it from a lack of landfill space. Again, especially in the last few years with the global issue of COVID and the realities of supply chain availability became clear in a whole new way. And now more recently with tariffs and transportation costs, there's those global impacts that sometimes become a consideration for circularity. And then there is the lens of economic prosperity, entrepreneurship, small business opportunity. And what we're doing in San Diego really comes from that last piece of putting the economy in the circular economy. California has the most manufacturing jobs in the US, over 1.2 million workers, and a diverse industrial economy. And that's because we have electronics, aerospace, food processing, medical manufacturing, and so much more. And it's also important from the lens of like where we are in San Diego County. San Diego County, as you can see here, borders with Mexico. Lots of opportunities in that we are the Tijuana-San Diego border is the largest metro area on the US-Mexico border. And the county is the fifth largest by population in the country. It is about just over 4,500 square miles. There's over 3.3 million residents, with a board of supervisors at the county level elected to represent the region. We are home to 18 tribal nations under 17 federally recognized tribal governments. That's the most of any county in the country. We are responsible for providing services to 23 unincorporated community planning areas. And we also work in tandem with 18 incorporated cities along that 70 miles of coast. And we are also the most biodiverse county in the United States. So a lot of assets for us to be playing with here. And also I should mention, 99% of our businesses are small businesses. So when it comes to thinking about circular economy, the motivation for economic prosperity really came up as through board direction through an initiative called EPIC. We love our acronyms in government. Here's another one: economic prosperity through innovative contracting. And this started as a way for us to think about how can we leverage our contracts as a county. Our annual budget in general last year was 8.62. This year, fingers crossed, we're going to be voting on it next week. It will be $9.15 billion. Last year, over 2.3 billion of that was spent on contracts. So that's procurement and services. So we have a lot of opportunity to influence how things happen in our region. And so the board said, let's put together a policy or a directive to update policies and also create new programs so that we can expand the county's reach to local small and disadvantaged businesses, disadvantaged business being a technical term that is recognized at the state and federal level. We also wanted to expand that to nonprofits and community-based organizations through outreach, education, and then that review of current programs. We also had set a goal for 25% of all of our procurement spend to be through these outlets for these types of businesses to receive. And I'm happy to share that last month we provided our update. This board directive started in 2024. We updated our policies in summer of last year, and we just released our 1 year update a little bit early to show that we actually have reached 25% of our goal, and now we're setting new thresholds to continue along this path. So you can see the county is committed to really advancing these opportunities for economic growth and development to all individuals in the communities that we serve. So if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about economic prosperity and contracting. The first goal of it is to be responsive and collaborative and have a culture of feedback, including all levels of staff and community. So as we approached this work, we had touch points with about 1,300 different staff within the organization, which is across 4 business groups and more than 40 departments, and is more than 20,000 strong. So really had iterative opportunities to see from a lot of different perspectives. And then we also worked with more than 400 small businesses in the region, as well as subject matter experts and standard developers as well. We were proud to be recognized for leadership and engagement from the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Coalition on this effort. We won the award last year for that engagement and outreach. Procurement and contracting policy updates. This was everything from how can we make it simpler for us to have vending opportunities to changing the thresholds and spending allowances. And of course, with government, if you can use a P card or like a credit card, you can work with business to business really easily. When you start getting into procurement and contracts, those take time. So we came up with a lot of new avenues to be able to increase flexibility, which then allows us to work with small businesses more simply and more straightforwardly. In addition, we built up several capacity building programs for small and diverse businesses. So over the last year, we've rolled out as a county and under the leadership of our Economic Development and Government Affairs Office, a small business desk that has multiple different programs that include things like free bookkeeping services, taking on some of the liability and helping to underwrite some of the liability insurance, because getting to that county mandated minimum threshold for liability insurance sometimes is just outside people's area. Having training, capacity building, support, and connecting these small businesses with free services and low-cost services in order for them to have the ability to actually implement and administer a county contract when they receive it. So not just about getting them in the door, but really helping them succeed across the entire breadth of the project. And I'll put some links in the chat so that you can learn more about those programs. Internal trainings and administrative manuals. So we also want people in our 20,000 person organization to be able to understand when someone gives them a call, what are they talking about? What are they asking for? And then also through our entire contracting and procurement process, how can we improve it? So for example, through our Office of Sustainability and Environmental Justice, which I oversee as the Chief Sustainability Officer for the county, we have office hours regularly on environmentally preferable procurement, which we included as our policy update. We included vendor characteristics to look out for, to have partners that are like-minded and share our goals and outcomes. And then also guidance on what is preferred products. So we are not telling people we are banning this item. It's very hard to be able to check every invoice anyway, but instead we're using an approach of behavioral change so that folks are really thinking comprehensively. So trainings, administrative manuals, insight, we're doing frequently asked questions. We're part of the Department of Purchasing and Contracting early trainings for what we call our cores or our contract representatives who are responsible for overseeing. It's now written into our selection committee and our prompts for how to write a procurement. We've increased standard language and example language. So it's really now threaded through everything that we're doing here. And then we were also board directed as part of this to do an assessment for circular economy. So really looking across that life cycle. I wanted to make sure I also touched on one policy in particular, which is B53. I'll put it in the chat because I think that language language is really exciting. It's our small local business policy. And we not only looked at those businesses that I mentioned before, but we have added veterans, disabled veteran-owned businesses, and through a new classification called SEE, which is a social equity enterprise. It's a new business category recognizing businesses that advance equity by addressing economic, social, and environmental disparities. So climate action and environmental justice, nonprofits and small businesses can also qualify for all those programs that I mentioned and are also receive additional support from the county. So then we also have brought in ways for them to demonstrate through green business certification and ESG reporting and different ways for them to differentiate themselves. This ties in with a number of different programs that we have, as well as policies. I mentioned environmentally preferable procurement. We also have a disposal of personal property policy where we also collect all the items. It's under a reutilization program, things that departments aren't using, and make them available first to other departments and then to nonprofits and schools in the area. We have the whole equity and sustainability and contracting effort, which I mentioned is all part of rewriting and rethinking our approach of how we write contracts. We're also in the tail end right now of a Green Industries and High Road Jobs initiative, looking at how do we attract new businesses to our region through the lens of maximizing decarbonization potential as a part of their service or product, paired with opportunities for the just transition and career pathways for our greater region's population. Our partners and colleagues over at the Department of Public Works lead our strategic plan to reduce waste. And then the umbrella for our office and OSCJ is the Regional Decarbonization Framework, which is all about promoting ways for public, private, and civic interests working together to achieve zero carbon emissions no later than 2045. Finally, last but certainly not least, a little bit more on that circular economy assessment. So this is a project underway working with Luke and the team of Borough Happold, as well as MIG, City Heights, Cumming Group. And it's been just a wonderful experience so far with community engagement, interviews with subject matter experts and advocates. The material flow analysis is now complete, and we understand where we want to focus that opportunity and implementation plan. So we are focusing first on construction and building materials, including furniture and bulky items, textiles, plastics, and then those cross-sector kind of general circular economy opportunities outside the three focus areas. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kjell to talk more about his work.
All right, thanks, Eden. And that was the policy perspective and kind of the really big picture, kind of setting how we as architects work. And now I'm going to get into a couple of case studies on how we work kind of going bottom up, of how we can just drive the process on our own as well. So I'm Kjell Anderson. I'm LMN's Director of Sustainable Design. We work on projects across the country, big ones and small ones all over. And we have a Path to Zero Carbon series that the link in the chat for that. And one of them is on the circular economy, and the one after that is on existing building reuse. And this is how we see the circular economy. Those raw materials enter at the upper left, and then you can have circular economy materials that are recyclable and recycled, such as aluminum and steel. And then those are manufactured into products that also can be circular. And those products are attached together in ways that allow them to be deconstructed, repaired, refurbished, and designed for disassembly. And if the product reaches the end of its life cycle, it can be disassembled. And then the materials of it can then be a part of the circular economy. So it's disassembled and it's past the end of its life. Then, the aluminum in it can be turned into new aluminum or recycled aluminum. And then circular economy products go over into circular economy buildings, which are designed for deconstructed, but those are also designed of long-lasting materials, and they're resilient buildings. They don't, they're waterproof, they don't leak, and they're, long life, loose fit. They're designed so that they can accommodate future expansions, future change of use, etc. And when the building has reached the end of its life for whatever reason, it can be deconstructed into products, which then can be given to other buildings or sold to other buildings. And if those products reach the end of life, it could be in materials. So the idea is you need very few raw materials on the upper left and very little landfill if the products we buy for our buildings are made of circular economy materials, the products we buy are circular economy products, and they're assembled into circular economy buildings. And then this is where often the circular economy breaks down. Design teams have to demand or claim products and have to specify design for disassembly. That's on the left. There needs to be time and fee for deconstruction, refurbishment, warehousing, so that the design teams command. In fact, I've been talking to a bunch of people lately, and they've suggested that it's the demand side that is the weak link in this. So for architects, designers, structural engineers, and others, we've got to find a way to find the products that are out there and demand them and allow them to be bid alongside new products in our specs, or even preferred over new products in our specs. Got to figure that out. So I'm going to get into 2 case studies, and I see Jen Chen on here, so pipe up if you want to say anything. Jen was the lead designer on this. This is Heinz, which is a global developer. Their headquarters in Seattle, where we started with someone who had built an office and not moved in a few years before. The client did not like the carpet. They were going to rip that out. This is what it looks like. This is the floor plan of it. It's fairly small. There was also a ceiling and a bunch of ceiling tiles that probably needed to be removed or replaced. They wanted to change the floor plan a bit, which could require a lot of demo. And we said, so the Heinz has an embodied carbon guide that they give to all their development managers. And we said, all right, but that's for structure and envelope. What if we applied embodied carbon to renovations like this? What if we tried to do a zero carbon renovation? What would that even mean? And so we explored that throughout this project. And what Jen did was bring embodied carbon to the design meetings. And that included things like they didn't like the carpet. So Jen picked up a piece of the carpet tile and put it in a new materials palette, and all of a sudden they loved it. It was recontextualized with other materials, and all of a sudden they were happy to keep it. And that right there saved a whole lot of carpet. You can see the acoustic insulation on the left that was bagged up and given to flood victims housing. That was from demolition because there was a little bit of demolition that went on. ACT ceilings were sent elsewhere as well. And then the client wanted a feature wall. And so the team looked around for how you do a zero carbon feature wall. And we found these wood offcuts that are going to be burned by the flooring manufacturer and sales. And we turned them into some grasshopper script and created a feature wall. And this is the client actually helping us because they were so excited about it, helping us put together a feature wall. And so the feature walls is back here, and we could have designed it out of brand new materials, but this is actually out of zero carbon materials. The paint was not zero carbon. Almost everything else, or all the wood in here is, and it turns into a feature wall. And one of the coolest things about this is that there's a story behind salvaged materials. As designers, we can create a story around lots of things, but salvaged materials actually do have a story. A lot of times, new materials have much less of a story. So this, when anyone walks into their office, they can say this feature wall was, zero carbon, made of salvaged materials. The wood desk in here has a story as well. The piece of glass that you can barely see on the left has a story as well. There was a conference room that was going to be demolished, and we found that the piece of glass was going to be demolished and removed was almost exactly the same size as a piece of glass we needed. And so it simply moved 30 feet and installed instead of putting in a new piece of glass. And you can still see the carpet in there. There's tons more stories on that, but I will save those for questions or for Jen to put in the chat if she wants. And other people worked on that as well. Next is the Austin Convention Center, a project that is under construction currently. It's in the city of Austin. Austin has a deconstruction ordinance, but it did not apply to the existing building that was on this site. So the team got together. We're going for ILFI zero carbon certification, fossil fuel free, and 20% embodied carbon reduction, which is very challenging in this market. And so as we were taking down the existing building, well before we were taking down the existing building, we got together and we found 20 or 30 items that we worked with 3 cost estimators and figured out that they were going to be about cost neutral to salvage and reuse. And we culled that list down to a smaller number based on deconstruction time and storage ability. And we found some interesting lessons, like if you have to store something in a conditioned space, it costs a lot more for storage than if you can store it in an unconditioned space. So what you'll see is all the stuff that we salvaged tended to be stuff that didn't need to be conditioned. Things like ceiling tiles and carpets do need to be in conditioned space. They can't reach, 150 degrees. in a Conex box in the summer, and some of them can't reach, 10 degrees in winter. Next, so that was a rendering of the new building. Here's a list of some of the things that were salvaged and reused and where they fit on the building. Some of the exciting parts were 60-foot long trusses we salvaged from the existing building. I think we salvaged about 85 of them. And we found that the carbon savings from salvaging them and reusing them is about 50% of the embodied carbon of a new truss. So we were able to save that. So even though they would have been recycled, hauling them away, recycling them, manufacturing them, bolting them together, and putting them back on site would have been about 50% of the embodied carbon of a new truss, or we saved about 50% in this. We also saved about, or reusing about 10,000 square feet of metal panel cladding. It's aluminum. It would have been recycled, but it saves a lot of energy and a lot of carbon when you just use it as it was and reuse it. So, getting a sample of this was really fascinating because I said, we as the architect need a sample of this as we would get if we did a new cladding panel. So the contractor just took a cladding piece, which are huge, cut it in half, and just sent it to us. And I got it, and it's like dirty, it's grimy, it's been outside for 30 years on this building. So we had to clean it ourselves and all that. But that's, just a different thing of thinking about salvaging products from an existing building. You have potential warranty issues, but you also need to make sure you have a sample before it goes into storage. We also are salvaging a lot of other materials on here. One of them is we had these interior decorative metal panels, and we're turning them into just back of house, essentially replacing diamond plate for bumpers along walls in the back of the house for the new convention center. We also have some wire mesh and some other high quality materials that were salvaged. So this total is about 600 metric tons of carbon saved through all this salvage and reuse. And in working through it took many months before demolition started. And then now all of it's been salvaged, and it will all be installed in the next year or two back in the building. And then we'll have a lot more stories to share about it. This is an image of it, so you can see the 60-foot trusses that are coming down there and on a truck. You can see the metal cladding panels on the right being taken down and stored. And then on the left, we also recycled 240,000 pounds of carpet. I think Interface took it back or was willing to show up and take it. And they actually can show that that a vast majority of it will be turned into new carpet and backing. So they have a program that's pretty effective there. So we can do this right now on our projects, and this is something that LMN is trying to do on our projects, and it's not easy. It's extremely difficult, but getting a demo walkthrough for reuse and salvage before we write our demo specs, and there's iPhone apps or Android apps you can get on your phone, and you just go in a room and you just wave it around, and it creates a 3D model of your space, so you can count how many ceiling tiles, how many carpet tiles are in this space, how many ceiling tiles have damage in them, or how many ceiling tiles have holes through them for lighting or sprinklers or something like that. So you can then go back and assess things. And in fact, some salvage contractors, if you send them those kinds of images, they will be able to not have to come out to site and spend quite as much time on site. So it's a little cheaper. We need more time allowance for demolition or deconstruction. It takes a bit more time to take things out. For instance, the steel trusses, they had to actually remove the roof in order to take out the steel trusses and keep them whole, instead of just yanking the whole thing down and having it collapse into a pile of stuff that they sort and send elsewhere. One interesting thing we found was that up to a third of the cost of a demo contractor is cost they don't include because they're going to sell a lot of materials into salvage or into recycling. So if you take all the good materials out, you will actually pay more for demo simply because the demo contractor can't sell those materials as part of their demolition scope. So that's one thing that we learned. We now can design with salvage and refurbished products. There are marketplaces. One thing I forgot to say about the Heinz project is that we needed 500 square feet of carpet tile near the end of the project, and Jen reached out to some manufacturers and said, hey, where can we get zero carbon carpet? And the manufacturer said, we have a warehouse of carpet that's been sold and not picked up, and it's going to go into the landfill. And so Jen and others went out there and found that there was a wide variety of carpet to choose from, and then chose some and took those home and used that instead of buying brand new carpet for that. There's so many more lessons I could get into, but I want to wrap it up, and I'll wait questions later. So I'm going to hand it off to Pauline.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I always hear something new, even though we've done this a couple times. So very cool. I think that I'm gonna go into the small, if you will. And I think leaning into what Chellen and Eden said, it's about recontextualizing and thinking about your opportunity. And I think Eden has always said, when you reduce waste, you reduce expenses. So this is about it doesn't have to cost more, and every moment is an opportunity. And in our office, there's a requirement and a very big ask that every project incorporate something found, something reused into their work. So I think that can help move our needle. So I'm going to start a little bit about the interesting thing is maybe about telling it, repositioning this, because often old material is thought of as old. But what if we think about it as vintage? And we think about this as the vintage economy, because that is kind of a cool thing. So is that a way to reframe the opportunity? And maybe I'll start where we started, which is when we were starting our office in 2005. We got into this existing space and we tried to move the builder to reuse doors and frames and studs, and it just cost too much, they said. But when we were looking to save a little bit money, one of the partner's friends was a stone distributor, had all this overage in their backyard, and we got a counter for $50. And that is the counter on the right, and it's there 20 years later. So there is opportunity. I will say this little moment changed because our partners were really the sweet of the yellow brick road. We were curmudgeons and lions, and we were not Glinda. Everyone was like, no, it can't be done. I don't know. I'm so afraid. But this little moment, because it saved money and got us there faster, changed who we are. We moved this into another project. In one of the downturns in 2009, we had a school, 22 classrooms, and they were hitting budget problems relative to materials. And we said, what about this leftover stone that exists in people's yard? And that came over, saved a ton of money, about 3.5 weeks of time. And really what sold it was that the materials that existed didn't match, but it gave the educators an opportunity to talk a little bit about why they're different. Because you could have a stone from Canada next to one from Brazil. What does that mean? What are the opportunities? It saved money. We had plastic lamb in there before, unfortunately. And so we now have a great story, or they have a great story at less cost. One other project to maybe illustrate that you can do this at any time in the project. It's always best if it starts with a vision. And in this case, the Kelsey is a affordable housing that Eden, that's where that little red arrow is, helped start when she was with the Department of the Environment in San Francisco. And it took a village to do this, but through the C40 competition, we were able to bring affordable housing for a population that is disproportionately marginalized, so that people of disability, and that's 26% of the United States, and that includes mobility and cognitive and health and neurodiverse. And so in the Civic Center, this project has come up largely thanks to Eden in this place of resistance and bravery. So the goals of the C40, and really again, to Eden's credit, crafted to really be attainable, but also the high North Star included the circular economy. So that meant everyone had to come in thinking about this all the time, because the idea was for it to be replicable. We were going to change minds and process and strategy to show it was possible in a place that was also asking for inclusive and accessible strategies, and in its planning, in its engagement, and through really bringing through real lived experiences through the design process. It started in 2019 and just finished last year in 2025 through COVID. So this is a way to say no hill too hard to climb if you can sort of keep to this original goal setting. Again, thank you, Eden. And work it through other standards. We did some inclusive standards. We worked through CORE for Living Futures CORE system, and then of course Greenpoint rated, driving all of that from C40 through. I'm going to talk about two clients who live in this building. One is the Kelsey. Sorry, the slide's a little chaotic, but on the left, the Kelsey's entrance comes off Van Ness, and then above the Disability Cultural Center entrance comes off of Grove, and they live together in this space where there's 112 units for where all of it is available for those with different abilities. And on the lower level is where the Disability Cultural Center is run by the Haven of Hope folks. Okay, so the Kelsey starts in 2020 and we're immediately over budget because there's no materials available. So I'm going to tell some stories about how the good ideas can come from others if we just allow that to happen, if we just share a bit of what we're trying to do. And this came from the builder. So Smith and Fong, who does bamboo flooring, had flooring in their warehouse for 2 years. 2 years, this flooring was just sitting there because nobody wanted it. And Cahill, contractor, said, well, do we want it? And we said, yes, absolutely. And within a few days, figured out how we could deploy it. To the builder's credit, they said, yes, we can try to make this happen. The longest time took the owner to decide, well, I don't know, what about the warranty? But for a developer, that's a short amount of time. And when they finally said, yes, we want it, somebody else took it. So bad news, good news. But the funny news is it's out there. Do we need to talk to our manufacturers, our contacts about what do they have in their warehouse, as Eden and Kjell were saying? We had to think about we were also doing the furniture and all the materials, and it had to be warm, accessible, but also different. It had to be considerate of how touch and smell is for folks who have various sensitivities, and it had to be beautiful. But again, we are still over budget, both in terms of furniture and soft costs. So it's just tight, not completely impossible, but again, it's getting tighter and tighter, of course, because the COVID really did shift our economy. At the same time, we were moving our offices. We were moving from 2 floors to 1, and we had a lot of furniture. We had chairs and butcher block tables and office furniture and pedestals and all kinds of things. And we said, hey, would you like to use some of this in your offices? And I am talking about really small things. These are not big things. But the client again said, I don't really know. We don't want leftover stuff because we shouldn't have to take less than. And so it was just, again, repositioning or recontextualizing the opportunity. And of course, showing them that what we have is not so bad. So in their office, there's our file cabinets and chairs that help to reduce the cost. In the lobby space too. And then we talked about the community spaces, because that was very clearly things that we had from an architect's office. And we looked at a variety of furniture and types, but with the dollars, we couldn't buy everything. But our interior architect said to the company, hey, we're looking for anything you have that you might not need anymore. And sure enough, there were 2 companies who were changing out or moving spaces and also changing out their showroom. And they said, well, we're happy to donate this because it would be great to move it to somewhere else, or else it'll go back into another warehouse, another space. So the lesson for us there is just, why not be open to talking to everybody about looking for things that may already exist, because we wouldn't have normally asked a showroom or Steelcase or Fair if they could. There was still we don't want the leftover, but when they walked into the showroom, they were floored because they wanted to make sure that it was worthy of their tenants, which is fair. But the good thing about this is that if you have folks with sensitivities, they can actually go and test out. So we use it in all their community spaces. So it's the chairs and tables and benches for outside. It was on the rooftop. It lived everywhere. And we were able to, throughout the space, show that this place could be furnished with existing materials, but also could save some money. So the Disability Center was happening just kind of tagged onto each other, similar goals, really thinking about a place to celebrate differences. And this is their front gate, which opens up. It's an art piece by a local artist. And it is a very tiny space. So everything mattered. This is 1,300 square feet. It had to flex. And it had to be, again, another place where things could adjust and change and be available for all. And surprise, we're immediately over budget. But that's, again, because some of the materials were hard to get. And this is where Steelcase came in and said, we need to change our showroom again for new inventory. We would love to donate it. this is the same, a different client, but sort of the same first blush reaction, which is we really don't want leftover furniture. So again, I think part of our job is to really bring forward how this is, maybe it's vintage, maybe it's loved, maybe it's elements and pieces and materials with a history and a memory to kind of add to your current design. So everything in the green dot was material, was furniture that was in the showroom. And so we tagged it with green. And that's 75% of that space. It went into offices as well. And the tagline here is that 75% of it is donated, and that saved about almost $200,000 in furnishing cost. I know it's crazy to think it costs that much, but it does. So that was a big learn for us. I would say there was a little more soft cost time than we would expect, but the win is to see these furnishings in their space. It's comfortable. They got to test it. They got to feel comfortable with it. Our client said they did a little dance as they came in, and it continues to be a part of their storytelling. The stone overage continues through all our projects. This again we started with composite. It was going to take 4 weeks to get. We found this other place about 40 minutes away, picked it or asked the clients to pick. And so in this little 1,300 square foot space, those arrows just show that it's possible. And we have happiness and lower carbon. And I think that's, again, really great way to replicate the story and get the story out. And just at a larger scale, in case this seems like it has to be a one-off or very bespoke, Kjell and I were part of a campus up in Redmond for a tech client. And in the middle of construction, probably the end of construction with maybe 5 or 6 months to go, they thought, well, why don't we just change all our furniture out because we have warehouses full of it, not just a small one, warehouses full. And this went to, Kjell, I think at least 6 or 8 buildings on this campus and saved, right? 75% of one building we did was changed out and with no hurt or concern by the users or the client. So you are the wizard is what we'd hope you'd tell everybody to find the treasure. And Kjell, do you want to give the plug?
Yeah. Yep. We're trying to find some more treasures, which are case studies of you all using salvage products in a project. So there's a QR code on there that gets you to a survey that's on the Build Reuse site. And we're trying to collect as many examples as possible of projects that have done circular economy things and even individual products. Just, hey, we reused 100 wall panels on this one project. Like, that's great. I would say the biggest impediment to me selling this to a client is the fact that the only case studies I have are the ones we've done and the few I've heard about. So we're trying to get as many case studies out there as possible. So if you use a QR code, it's really intentionally very, very short. So you can go in and submit a case study, and then then those become public, what you submit, and then we can all have a better resource from which to draw.
That's it.
Well, thank you so much, the three of you. What a lovely presentation and a great call to action there at the end. And I'll give a quick plug to the SCI Sustainability Committee, who's also collecting case studies for structural reuse. So exciting to see the trusses being reused on your project. Just across the board, I just always really inspired, and there's so much opportunity in this field and so much potential because there is a lot of waste. But I love the framing of the vintage economy, and there's just so many ways to sell this beyond sustainability, and I just think people see a lot of hope in it. So I hope everyone in the chat give some virtual applause here. Thank you so much for sharing. We did have a couple questions, and I did want to actually plug. Oh, nice, lots of applause. Melissa Wenzel is also on. She shared a little bit earlier. So from Hennepin County, plugged the Build Reuse conference later this year. Definitely want to plug that. I'll also share. I've watched a couple of the reuse design leaders workshops that they've had. Great webinars, and those are recordings online too. I'll dig those links up while we have a bit of time for a Q&A here. But I do think it's also an opportunity for the three of you to maybe say a little bit more about the collaboration it takes between both contractors and clients.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we talked to like 6 months before demolition started. we talked to the 3 cost estimators on the Austin project and tried to figure out, all right, what does it cost to deconstruct this bit, this product? How easy is it? What does it cost to store it? And what does it cost to reinstall it and deliver it to the site? Because it's now, if we store it somewhere, then they have to deliver it to the site. It's not delivered by the company that you buy it from. So there's a bunch of logistics in there. And then what is the cost savings relative to buying a new product? And if you do all the math, almost everything we wanted to do turned out to be cost effective. The time piece of it was the only time I answered the structural truss, why that took more time, but nothing else really took more time because they were able to fit it into their overall schedule because they knew about it well in advance.
Yeah, I'll just add that for a couple of projects where we started out with this would be great if, and then tried to understand what the pinch points were on a schedule, that helped future conversations because when you get to get something that exists, you're mitigating the risk of will it arrive on time, which is a huge risk we understand from builders. And we had a school project that where the donor didn't like the panels and it was about 5 minutes away. And we were able to move that panel to another gym school project. And the big gift the builder said was because they didn't have to worry about procuring it. The storing was small in that case because it was some exterior panel. So I think it is about having that conversation a little bit early on because I do think some of the good stories will come from the sub trades and the builders and even the engineers. If we let them, yeah.
I can share from a policy perspective something we looked at when I was at the San Francisco Environment Department, and I know that my former colleagues there are still trying to figure out how to implement this as an incentive, is that demolition permit can to get that J number, and the demolition permit can take 7, 9 months. And so we were thinking about, well, what if the demolition permit takes 7 to 9 or more months, but a deconstruction permit can be fast tracked so that the time delta for deconstruction, at least on that aspect of it, could become a time saving device and give people a different way of thinking about hard costs and soft cost savings.
Yeah, I love that holistic framing and just sometimes reshifting how we're looking at it. There's a question from Mercy, who's also doing lots of great work with Turner in LA. Was reuse driven by owner or the design team or contractor advocating?
Was it a specific project or just general question, I guess?
I think it would be to any of the projects that I'm sure there's probably a mix of answers of who's pushing this, but I love also the industry pushing to like shift. It takes all different perspectives, and we're building out a whole new set of infrastructure to make this happen, both physical and just trailblazing our standard practices. But Pauline, how about you start?
Well, I would say that maybe because we're generally troublemakers in this group here, it usually starts with we'll ask the question or and it'll be either through schedule or procurement or availability. I will say when we've had some of the best ideas come through the build side. So when I say we should let them, it's not like they're prevented from it, but there is this assumption that architects and designers want things pristine. So if we just kind of wipe that away and say that here's a new day, what can we do to build story? I think that has sort of let things come through easier. Yeah. Kjell or Den?
I answered it in the chat a bit, driven by the design and construction teams and self-motivated, and it contributed to CLF-LA zero carbon pending not pending, but tracking certification.
I think Heather had a question.
Sure. And I realize I don't have my affiliation. Heather Trim with Zero Waste Washington, and these were awesome. I have a question on the Austin project. You said that you winnowed down partly because of the condition, unconditioned storage, but were there other items that you winnowed down that weren't related to condition? And what were they? Just to hear, like, what were some of the challenging items?
Let's see. Carpet tile, we thought it was good, but there was kind of some just internal issues that we couldn't get past. We looked at curtain wall and glazing. We knew that the glazing was old enough that it probably didn't have, 30 years of life left in it. And that was kind of a problem. You don't want to replace glazing 5 years after your capital, expense thing. And you don't want to have to replace it one by one either. The curtain wall, I think we got pretty close on that one, but in the end, it came down to how are we going to remanufacture gaskets that fit this exact curtain wall that was built long ago that are
Mm.
going to be warranted as part of the waterproofing system. That's what it really came down to for that. Ceiling tiles, I think the logistics of ceiling tiles are challenging because they break so easily that you have to just take them down very, very carefully. There were some really cool glass pieces that were part of light fixtures, and we were going to turn those into blade signs. And that was going to actually be a cost benefit to the project. But in the end, it just, the quantities weren't quite there, and we didn't think that we could replicate that exact thing again. So it was because we didn't have quite enough. There was more metal panel, but we needed a specific area to put it in. You can't just, just because you can salvage 17,000 square feet doesn't mean you can reuse 17,000 square feet. And they're also exact sizes that you have to, you've got a Lego kit and you're trying to build something else with a Lego kit. You're not going to use all the pieces. So we didn't want to salvage more than we could really realistically use. There was some granite, and we looked at salvaging that and turning into decomposed granite for the landscape. That didn't end up happening. Some of the granite was set in mortar in a way that we didn't think we could get it out without breaking it. There's a lot of stone in there that we wanted to salvage, but we didn't think we could get enough of it out without breaking it because mortar and the way it was installed. Yeah, that's a short list of some of the things and why.
I wanted to make a pitch for what Eden's doing and maybe part of leaning into what Kjell you've been doing a lot of, which is sort of make a case also on policy to folks that we engage in the same way, like case studies help us say proof of concept. I think policies that are existing are ways we could, advocate.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Pauline. As you can see, I mentioned as board directed, and many municipalities, local and regional jurisdictions cannot take on projects if they are not board directed, if they are not in the budget, if it is not explicitly stated as a priority. So helping folks who are your representatives understand your passions, your priorities, your needs, your expectations is really critical to help us work with communities on these topic areas. So thank you, Pauline, so much for bringing that up. For example, one new item that's just come up is an urban wood study of looking at reuse of street trees and creating new economic benefits through that. And so our colleagues are just starting to spearhead that because of the impetus of board direction, board interest. So new things are constantly coming up, but they need to know because as you can imagine, otherwise, everything is important and nothing stands out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a super important thing to hone in on. Thank you so much for including that. Well, thank you so much again for presenting. I think it was phenomenal. It's clear why it was a Greenbuilt presentation, and we're so lucky to have you all. And I just want to say thank you so much again.